Millionaire is left speechless when autistic girl and boy seeking shelter transform his life. Jonathan Hale walked through the shelter's doors, the sounds of the bustling city drowning into a muffled hum behind him. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the weight of his riches pressed on his chest. He was accustomed to opulence, dazzling restaurants, and glossy events. But now, loneliness wrapped around him, squeezing tighter each day since his partner's sudden death. The cause still loomed over him like a dark cloud. The whispers of betrayal danced in the shadows of his thoughts. As he wandered through the quiet halls, photos of smiling faces adorned the walls. Each child's eyes sparkled with hope, contrasting sharply with the emptiness he felt. He brushed against peeling paint and worn edges, evidence of a place that had sheltered too many stories of struggle. The smell of unwashed dishes and faint detergent lingered in the air, invoking a sense of desperation. Yet there was an undeniable warmth. That's when he saw her, Mia. She sat in a corner, engrossed in a book, her fingers tracing the words as if they were cherished treasures. Her dark curls framed a round face lit by a smile that seemed to glow. She looked up, catching his gaze with eyes that shimmered like pools of wonder. "Do you want to read with me?" she asked, her voice soft yet full of determination. Jonathan was taken aback. Her invitation cut through his cloud of sorrow like a ray of sunlight. Beside her was Theo, a boy with a furrowed brow and cautious eyes. He sat on the floor, doodling something with intense focus. Jonathan kneeled down, intrigued. "What's that?" he inquired. Theo hesitated, then held out a drawing of a crumbling building. "It's a shelter, but it's going to be torn down soon," he murmured. The weight of those words slammed into Jonathan's chest, igniting a flicker of urgency. "How do you know?" he pressed, adrenaline coursing through him. "Because they want to build fancy apartments where people can't afford to live," Mia chimed in, her expression fiercely determined despite her small stature. "We protect this place. It's our home." Jonathan felt a spark of admiration for their resilience. These children, despite their struggles, were claiming a stake in their world. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan began volunteering, drawn deeper into their lives. Mia's excitement sparked something inside him, a sense of purpose he thought he had lost forever. Theo, too, began to thaw, slowly revealing fragments of his past, a mix of sadness and determination. Among laughter and tears, they formed an unlikely family, a fragile bond woven through shared hopes and whispers of what could be. But then, shadows stretched over their sanctuary as the developer appeared, sharp-suited and slick, pitching his vision of progress. He spoke of business, profit, and contracts, his voice a chilling melody of greed. Jonathan stood at the center of their fight, faced with a choice between the life he once lived and the new family he was desperate to protect. Yet Mia held a secret that tied into Jonathan's late partner, unraveling the very threads of loyalty and truth he had thought he understood. Would it fracture their newfound connection or forge an even deeper bond? Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content coming up. And while you're there, give me a big like to help me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. As the developer's words echoed in Jonathan's mind, he felt every heartbeat pulse with urgency. The vision of luxury apartments loomed over them like a looming storm cloud, threatening to wash away the fragile hope Mia and Theo had built. Just then, a commotion erupted outside, slicing through the tense atmosphere like a knife. Jonathan turned towards the noise, anxiety bubbling in his chest. Mia and Theo, sensing his restlessness, followed his gaze. Outside the shelter, a small crowd had gathered, shouting and waving signs. "Save our shelter! We won't back down!" Their voices swelled and fell, a cacophony of desperation. Jonathan felt a rush of adrenaline. It was a moment of solidarity, a community rising to fight for a place they called home. But then, the atmosphere shifted. A sharp scream rang out, piercing the air. Jonathan's gut twisted. He raced outside, with Mia and Theo close on his heels. The sight that met them chilled him to the bone. A young woman lay sprawled on the pavement, her face pale and twisted in pain. Her belongings were scattered around her. A stark portrait of vulnerability. "What happened?" Jonathan shouted, rushing to her side. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, revealing two men in sleek suits arguing angrily just feet away. "She collapsed," one bystander said, panic in his voice. "She was here protesting the development. Said they were trying to push her out." Jonathan's heart sank. He recognized her as one of the fervent activists who had fought tirelessly for their shelter. Mia knelt beside the woman, instinctively reaching out to her. "Please, can you hear me? We need help!" Jonathan's throat tightened as he saw Theo's face shift from concern to fear. This wasn't just an issue of shelter. It was someone's life, unfolding before them. Suddenly, the crowd gasped, and the bickering executives fell silent. The woman's eyes fluttered open, her voice barely a whisper. They know about us. They want to erase everything." She paused, drawing in a shaky breath. "Because I discovered something. There's a plan, a file. It's hidden in the shelter." "What?" Jonathan felt a whirlwind of emotions. Was there more to this fight than he realized? "What file?" But before she could respond, her eyes rolled back, and she slumped against the ground. Panic rippled through the crowd, and Jonathan felt his chest constrict with dread. "Someone call an ambulance," he yelled. But inside, a storm of questions churned. What plan? What could be so dangerous that someone would want to keep it hidden? Mia grabbed her arm tightly, looking up at Jonathan with her wide, fearful eyes. "We have to find that file. It could help us save the shelter." Theo hesitated, his drawing in his hand forgotten. "But what if it's dangerous?" Jonathan stood, breathless. The urgency of the situation swirled around him. The fight for the shelter had just transformed into something much bigger. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. His life and theirs would never be the same. Would he remain loyal to the past or step into this uncertain new reality? The potential consequences loomed like the storm clouds above, dark and heavy, leaving Jonathan to wonder if he truly understood the stakes. Jonathan's heart raced as he crouched beside the fallen woman, the crowd thickening around them with whispers and gasps. Mia's grip tightened on his arm, her face pale and anxious. There was urgency in the air, heavy like a storm waiting to break. "Someone needs to hurry," he called out again, panic lacing his voice. No one moved. Eyes darted between the crumpled figure and the slick-suited men nearby, their expressions a mix of boredom and disdain. It was as if the life on the ground barely mattered compared to the business deal at hand. Mia leaned closer to the woman, a desperate plea reflected in her eyes. "Please, don't leave us. We need to know about the file." Her words hung in the air, thick with desperation. Then, without warning, the woman's body convulsed, and Jonathan felt a chill creep up his spine. "What's happening?" he shouted, his voice rising above the crowd. He could see distress painted on Theo's face, a flicker of fear igniting in his gaze. They were losing time, and he wasn't equipped to deal with this emergency. Then, in a sudden rush, the woman's eyes snapped open wide, locking onto Jonathan's. They know! It's..." she gasped, but her words were swallowed by a violent cough. Blood splattered from her lips onto the pavement, crimson pooling around them. An instant shockwave of horror radiating through the crowd. "Help! Please, Jonathan shouted again. But his voice was drowned out by chaos. People shrieked, some stepping back in horror. They hadn't just witnessed the woman collapse. Something darker was unfolding. In the middle of the confusion, one of the executives smirked, his eyes glancing at the scene with a calculated indifference. "This is just a diversion," he muttered to his well-dressed companion. "Let's move forward." "Move forward?" Jonathan spat, livid. "You're going to let this happen while someone is dying?" Ignoring him, the executive turned to his colleague and raised an eyebrow. "Clean up on aisle 3. Mia's quick breath drew Jonathan's attention. "Look!" she shouted, pointing. "Something's happening!" The atmosphere shifted again. The air felt electric as a figure emerged from the crowd, pushing through to the front. It was a woman, late 30s, wearing a bright red jacket stained with paint, eyes wild and fierce. She stepped forward and shouted, "This is a setup! The plan to take this shelter isn't about development, it's about control." Gasps swept through the crowd. Jonathan's chest tightened. Control? What did she mean? Before he could fully process, the woman continued. "The file the girl spoke of? It's not just about the shelter. It's about information that could expose a corruption pipeline." Her voice trembled with urgency. Suddenly, the fallen woman's eyes widened again, and she pushed through the crowd, rising as if propelled by an invisible force. "You have to stop them! They've already silenced." Her voice trailed off, and she swayed, catching herself on the edge of the pavement. Jonathan felt his heart drop. The thread he had clung to for hope was unraveling before his eyes. Everything was shifting. The stakes soared higher than he had imagined. Before he could wrap his head around it, a loud crash echoed. A black SUV, sleek and menacing, screeched to a halt right in front of them. The doors swung open, and men in dark suits spilled out, moving with alarming speed, danger radiating from their very presence. Jonathan's instincts screamed at him to protect Mia and Theo. "Run!" he shouted, his voice booming through the chaos as he grabbed their hands. They barely had time to react, but as they turned to flee, the reality of their lives shattered in an instant. "Wait!" Theo cried, wrenching free of Jonathan's grip. "What if we just—" But before he could finish, one of the men lunged forward, his hand shooting out, grabbing Theo by the collar. "You're coming with us!" Jonathan's breath caught. Everything he thought he knew, the love, the friendships, now hung by a thread. Secrets roared through the air like wild flames, threatening to consume them all. What had he just stepped into? And now, as the crowd erupted in screams, the truth felt darker than ever. Would they each emerge unscathed? Or was the world they built about to collapse under the weight of unspoken truths? As the confusion erupted around him, Jonathan's instincts kicked in. "Run!" he shouted again, gripping Mia's and Theo's hands tightly. Panic exploded in his chest as he wrestled with the realization that their world was spiraling into chaos. The two suited men were closing in on Theo, their shadows stretching like dark tendrils, threatening to snatch him away. Mia's eyes, wide with fear, darted back and forth. Jonathan pulled them both toward the chaotic crowd, desperately trying to navigate to safety. "We can't let them take you," he said, his voice strained and urgent. But the crowd was thick, bodies pressed against each other in the rush to escape the confrontation. Suddenly, the woman in the red jacket lunged forward, arms waving like a wild bird. "Stop! You can't let them take anyone!" Her voice cut through the chaos, a fierce battle cry that halted the rush of bodies. For an instant, silence fell, the crowd frozen as they turned towards her. Jonathan glanced back, his heart plummeting as one of the suited men clocked her with an icy glare. "Step aside," he snapped, his voice cold as steel. "This does not concern you." But the woman didn't budge. Her piercing eyes held a fire. "It concerns us all. We have the power. We can't be silenced." A sudden boom erupted behind them. A deafening sound, like thunder cracking the air. Jonathan turned, confusion twisting his gut. The street shook, and a terrifying sight confronted him. An armored vehicle, not the black sedan, but a hulking tank, was rolling into view, stirring the dirt and debris. Gasps echoed from the crowd. Whispers morphed into screams. Before Jonathan could comprehend the full extent of the chaos, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. From the back of the tank, figures emerged in black gear, faces concealed behind helmets. They moved like shadows, swift and deadly. Jonathan's insides churned. Terror clawed at him. "What's happening?" Mia breathed, her small hand trembling in his grip. Jonathan opened his mouth, but no words came. He felt the suffocating weight of helplessness. The confusion surrounding them amplified into an unbearable crescendo of cries and gasps. Then, piercing through the chaos, Theo stepped forward, hesitant but unwavering. "No, you can't," he shouted, though his voice quivered. "We're just kids. We have a right to be here." The suited man holding Theo's collar narrowed his eyes. "You think you have rights? You're in way over your heads." And then, without warning, the woman in the red jacket yelled, "Get down!" A loud explosion followed her command, the blast tearing through the air with a violent force. Jonathan barely managed to shield Mia and Theo, instinctively lowering his body over theirs. A surge of dust and debris flew into the air, obscuring everything. The last thing he saw was the armored figure approaching, ready to strike. When the dust settled, Jonathan's heart raced, the echo of the explosion still ringing in his ears. Slowly, fear creeping in, he dared to lift his head. But what he found knocked the breath from his lungs. The suited man who grabbed Theo was on the ground, lifeless, his suit stained with something dark. The armored figure stood amidst the chaos, their stance imposing. They surveyed the scene, the tension thickening, heavy like a storm. Jonathan turned back to Mia and Theo, wide-eyed and breathing heavily. But it was Theo's expression, his face twisted in horror, that gripped Jonathan's heart. What just happened?" Jonathan whispered, shaken to his core. Then, as if pulled from the darkness of the crowd, the woman in the red jacket stepped forward again, her face lit with revelation. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," she said, voice trembling but steady. "The file was just the beginning. There's so much more, and it all connects to you, Jonathan." His heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "I know who you are, and so do they," she said, glancing toward the armored figure, who turned slightly, revealing an insignia on their chest that sent a chill of understanding down his spine. Jonathan's world spun. Everything he thought he understood, which side he was on, who to trust, was crumbling. What did they know about him? Why did it matter? And as he looked at Mia and Theo, uncertainty filled his chest. The fight was just beginning, but now it felt more dangerous than ever. Would they be able to protect each other? Would their bond hold strong against the looming shadows? His heart raced with fear and determination. What would he do next? Jonathan's heart raced as he stared at the woman in the red jacket. "What do you mean, it connects to me?" he demanded, overwhelmed by the surge of uncertainty flooding his mind. Mia clutched his arm, her breath shallow. Theo's wide eyes darted between them, fear pulsating through the air like a live wire. "It's time," the armored figure interjected, their voice deep and commanding, piercing through the tension. "We need to move." But Jonathan stood rooted to the spot, confusion gripping him like a vice. He wanted to question everything, to understand why this was happening. "What's your connection to me?" he pressed, voice vibrating with anxiety. "Jonathan!" Mia tugged at his sleeve, her fear palpable. "We have to go!" Suddenly, a loud crack thundered through the crowd again. A gunshot, sharp and chilling. The panic erupted once more, bodies scrambling in every direction. Jonathan instinctively shielded the kids, adrenaline surging. "Stay close!" he shouted, adrenaline pumping as chaos swallowed the street. But the surge of people jostled them apart, and Jonathan's grip on Theo's hand slipped. "Jonathan!" Theo yelled, panic-stricken as a swarm of bodies pushed him away. In a heartbeat, he was swallowed by the crowd. Theo! Jonathan strained to shout, but voices blurred into a distant roar. He could see Mia, her face a mask of anxiety, as she grasped his hand tightly, pulling him away. But just then, an unexpected sound cut sharply through the chaos. A familiar and haunting voice echoing from behind the armored figure. "Put your hands up!" Jonathan froze, heart plummeting as he recognized the voice. No. He turned slowly, dread coiling in his stomach. Emerging from the remnants of the crowd was a tall figure, a face he thought he'd never see again. It was Sarah, the very partner he had lost, the one whose death had left a gaping hole in his heart. "Sarah?" he gasped, disbelief washing over him. "But I thought you were." He stumbled over his words, torn between joy and confusion. "You died." "I faked my death, Jonathan, for your safety," she shouted, rushing towards him, urgency in her eyes. "I had to. They were coming for you, too." "Coming for me?" Jonathan blinked, his world tilting on its axis. "Who?" Before she could answer, another gunshot rang out, closer this time. Chaos erupted again. And Jonathan instinctively pulled Mia closer as fear surged like fire in his veins. The armored figure stepped protectively in front of Sarah, positioning themselves like a shield. "We need to go," the armored figure yelled, urgency lacing their words. "This isn't just about the shelter anymore." "Jonathan, look at Sarah, her eyes pleading. I swear I'll explain everything, but we need to trust them. We don't have time." Questions crashed in his mind, relentless and chaotic. Did he really trust her? After everything? A voice in the crowd screamed, "They're not getting away!" Jonathan's instincts yelled at him to run, but his heart was still spinning. "Wait!" he shouted. Uncertainty tormented him. "What does this mean for us? What did you uncover? What are we fighting?" Sarah's face shimmered with a mixture of urgency and melancholy. "Everything has changed, Jonathan. All of it." Then, without another moment's notice, a thunderous crash echoed as the tank jolted forward, plowing into the crowd. Bodies fell. Screams pierced the air, and Jonathan felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. "Run!" he shouted, diving while dragging Mia along. But his mind was a storm of questions. Was Sarah truly back? What secrets lingered in the shadows? What danger were they truly fighting? The world split open, leaving Jonathan gasping in the realization that nothing would ever be the same. The fight was just beginning, and as he looked back at Sarah, her presence ignited a dangerous spark inside him. Who was she now? Really? And as the smoke rose and chaos engulfed them, Jonathan couldn't shake the gnawing thought. How deep did the deception go? Would he ever truly know the truth? Jonathan's heart was a drum inside his chest, pounding against the chaos erupting around them. His mind spun, still reeling from the shock of Sarah's unexpected appearance. "You faked your death?" he managed to breathe out, his thoughts racing. His fingers tightened around Mia's hand as he glanced back toward the armored figure, who seemed equally perplexed by Sarah's sudden claim. The crowd had devolved into sheer bedlam. People screamed and scrambled, trying to escape the chaos. Yet Jonathan felt frozen, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He wanted to reach out to Sarah, to understand the depth of her deception, but the pressing danger clawed at him. "Jonathan, we need to," Sarah began, but another gunshot split the air, ringing through the chaos like a broken clock. Jonathan flinched, instinctively shielding Mia, who trembled beside him. "Let's go," the armored figure barked, but Jonathan couldn't move. The scenario unraveled like a film in his mind, scenes flashing through his eyes. Moments spent with Sarah, shared laughter, the day everything changed. The twist of fate that took her away lay heavy in his heart. Suddenly, through the disarray, he caught sight of a flicker of something amidst the smoke, a shadow darting toward them. It was Theo, pushing through the crowd, fear evident on his face. "I found you!" he gasped, breathless. Relief washed over Jonathan momentarily until he noticed the small, crumpled piece of paper clutched tightly in Theo's hand. "What is that?" Jonathan asked instinctively, guiding Theo closer to Mia and him. I don't know," Theo stammered. eyes wide. "I found it on the ground, but I think it's important." Before Jonathan could reach for it, a wave of dark figures rushed from the armored vehicle, charging toward them with a sense of purpose that struck Jonathan cold. The woman in the red jacket stood firm, pumping her fist as if rallying the scattered crowd. "Don't let them intimidate you! Stand together!" Yet panic rippled in every direction. A voice sliced through the chaos, carrying authority and urgency. "Secure the area! We can't let anyone get away!" Jonathan's panic surged. His feet could have turned to stone. The armored figures began rounding people up, but amidst the chaos, his mind raced. "What's on that paper, Theo?" he asked, urgency bleeding through his tone. "I don't know," Theo replied, fear lighting his eyes. "But it was right next to that woman." "What woman?" Jonathan was ready to panic again. He felt the pressure of the moment weighing heavily. But before Theo could answer, the woman in the red jacket suddenly staggered, clutching her head, blood trickling from a small wound hidden beneath her hair. A bullet grazed her. Time slowed as Jonathan's heart dropped into his stomach. "No!" he shouted, reaching out for her just as she collapsed. The sight triggered a riot of emotions as the crowd erupted into screams. The armored figure whipped around, ready to engage, but someone shouted from behind them, "You're all fools! You think she's the hero?" Jonathan turned towards the voice, confusion swirling inside him, and then shock washed over him as the figure stepped into the light. One of the suited men from earlier, a familiar smirk painted across his face. "You really don't know, do you?" he taunted, shrugging casually, an unsettling grin playing at the corners of his mouth. "She's been playing both sides the entire time." Jonathan's breath hitched. Doubt flooded his mind, like ice water spreading through his veins. "What do you mean?" The man took a step closer, his gaze walking into Jonathan's. "You think this is just about the shelter? You have no idea what you're part of. She's the one who set it all in motion." Mia gasped, her grip tightening on Jonathan's hand. "What?" "Everything. All the chaos. All of it is to keep you in the dark. You're just a pawn in this game," he sneered. Jonathan's heart raced as reality crashed around him. Was Sarah really the villain? Did she betray them all? All the moments they shared were painted in a new, dark light. The truth hung heavy in the air, waiting to shatter everything they had fought for. "Sarah!" he yelled, despairing as he locked eyes with her, crumpled by the ground, realizing he now stood at a crossroads he never intended to face. And at that moment, as confusion and bitterness formed a storm inside him, he knew he had to choose. But how could he trust anyone now? The crowd surged around him, voices twining in a web of fear and doubt. What was real? What was a lie? Jonathan's heart thundered with uncertainty as he stood at the precipice of a shocking revelation. He was through with one truth, only to be thrust into another, darker reality that raised a haunting question. Could he ever unravel the true nature of those he loved? Or would he simply become another casualty in their web of lies? As Jonathan stood frozen in that chaos, the suited man's smirk twisted into an unsettling grin, each word he spoke clawing deeper into Jonathan's heart. "You're just a pawn in this game," he taunted again. And Jonathan felt the world spinning around him, a dizzying whirl of fear and betrayal. But with Theo back at his side, clutching the crumpled paper, and Mia's grip like a vice on his arm, Jonathan steeled himself. "No, you're lying," he said, desperation lacing his voice. He wouldn't accept it. He needed to believe in the people he loved. But just as the man took a step forward, ready to unleash more venom, the armored figure sprang into action. "We don't have time for this!" they shouted, rushing forward with a speed that stunned Jonathan. He could barely register what was happening when the figure launched themselves at the suited man, tackling him to the ground. A flurry of fists flew, echoes of the struggle mingling with the distant screams of the crowd. In the chaos, Jonathan's eyes were drawn to Sarah, still on the ground. This strange new reality confounded him. Was she a traitor? Did she play everyone, including him? "Sarah!" he called, but he couldn't tell if she heard him over the uproar of bodies colliding. Then, suddenly, there was a shriek. Jonathan's head whipped around to see Mia, her face draining of color. A second later, she pointed, mouth agape. Look! The crowd had scattered slightly, a wave parting, revealing a chilling sight. A woman in a sleek dress, adorned with bright glimmering patterns, stepped forward from behind the armored vehicle. She looked poised, unbothered by the chaos or the violence surrounding her. With a flick of her wrist, a pulse of energy radiated from her, silencing shouting and commotion. People stopped, jaws slack, eyes glued on her, as if enchanted. Jonathan blinked, shocked, feeling an icy chill creep up his spine. There was something familiar and terrifying about her. "Mia!" he shouted, but his voice felt like a whisper against the sudden void. "Mia," the woman echoed, her voice smooth and almost melodic. "You've come so far, little one, but it's time to awaken." "Awaken?" Jonathan echoed, confusion twisting his gut. What was happening? Mia trembled beside him. "Who are you?" The woman turned her piercing gaze on Jonathan. "You're the key, Jonathan. All of this, the shelter, the fight, it's only the beginning." She raised a hand and an unnatural wind swirled around them, uprooting debris and silence. "Stop!" he yelled, feeling a surge of terror rise. "What do you mean I'm the key?" But before she could respond, the ground shook again, this time more violently. It felt like an earthquake, and Jonathan was thrown off balance, grabbing onto Theo to keep them steady. The woman's presence was a mesmerizing paradox, her eyes gleaming with a power he couldn't comprehend. Then, as dust filled the air, something shifted. The armored figure froze. Mid-fight, body tensing, an unmistakable fear flashed across their eyes. "Get back!" they screamed, throwing Sarah back behind them. "What?" Jonathan fumbled, anxiety clawing at him. He should be running, pulling the kids to safety, but the pull of that woman's enigmatic presence anchored him. Just then, the earth buckled violently, splitting in a wide crack just near the armored vehicle. An explosive sound emerged, drowning everything. A blinding light burst forth, illuminating the chaos, leaving no shadows behind. Jonathan shielded his eyes, heart racing. And when he finally dared to look again, everything changed in the blink of an eye. The powerful figure was gone. The crowd was silent, all eyes on the gaping chasm that opened where the armored vehicle once stood, and from it emerged a flash, a shimmering, undulating form that took shape and solidified into a figure that looked eerily familiar. "Jonathan," it spoke, voice laced with familiar warmth, yet something eerie lay beneath. "I've come to set things right." And as Jonathan's heart fell into a pit of confusion, realization ignited within him. The truth surged forth, shattering everything he thought he knew. The identity of this new figure struck with lightning force, leaving Jonathan breathless and terrified. Could this truly be happening? "Mom?" he whispered, voice trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. But even as he uttered the word, uncertainty gripped him tightly. What did this mean? And what darkness was waiting to be unleashed? Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest as the figure stepped toward him, its face almost a mirror image of someone he thought he had lost forever. "Mom?" he whispered, disbelief flooding his senses. The moments they shared crushed beneath a tidal wave of confusion. "I've come to set things right," she said, her voice like a long-lost melody that washed over him. But amid his rush of emotions, doubt gnawed at his insides. Everything he thought he knew began to twist and contort. This wasn't just a reunion. It felt like the prelude to a reckoning. "What does that even mean?" he stammered, feeling the weight of Mia's and Theo's curious stares. "You can't just show up after all." This time, the crowd held its breath, eyes darting between Jonathan and his mother. The tension thickened like storm clouds overhead, a potent mix of confusion and fear. Then, without warning, the ground quaked violently beneath their feet. The noise clawed at him. Gravel and concrete shattered like glass, and the world tilted sideways. "Get down!" the armored figure shouted, lunging to shield Jonathan, Mia, and Theo, just as the crowd erupted into a frenzied chaos. In a blink, the scene warped into bedlam. People scrambling, bodies toppling, and screams filling the air. But Jonathan couldn't move. He was frozen, caught in the flutter of possibility and disbelief. "What's happening?" he yelled, trying to find his footing in the turmoil. Then, right before his eyes, his mother shimmered, light cascading over her form, as if she were melting into the air. The crowd gasped, the sound a collective intake of breath. "No!" Jonathan reached out, but she dissolved, leaving only an echo of her presence. "What the?" Theo's voice cracked, cutting through Jonathan's own confusion, pulling him back to the frantic reality surrounding them. And then it happened. An explosion of blinding light burst from the crack in the ground where the armored vehicle had stood. Jonathan shielded his eyes again, but this time he could physically feel the pressure of energy surging through the air. It pushed at him, threatening to consume everything. "Run, now!" the armored figure barked. Their voice rising above the chaos. But the moment felt suspended, like time had paused. Jonathan felt an invisible force pulling him toward the light and away from everything he understood. "We can't just leave," Mia cried, her voice trembling as she struggled to stay grounded in the extreme shift of the moment. But before he could respond, a familiar voice broke through, heavy with urgency. "You must leave now, Jonathan." It was Sarah, clawing through the rubble, blood trickling from a cut above her brow. "The past is collapsing. It's too late for them, but not for you." "Not for us?" Jonathan felt panic rise as he glanced at Theo and Mia, their faces painted with terror and bewilderment. He couldn't comprehend the implications of Sarah's words. "What do you mean? What can we do?" "Just trust me," she shouted, desperation lacing her tone. Before he could question further, a terrible roar erupted, the crack widening like a gaping maw. Jonathan pushed forward, grabbed Mia and Theo, and started moving, feet pounding against the trembling ground. But just as they reached the edge of the crowd, Theo suddenly stopped, eyes going wide. "The paper!" he yelled, raising his hand as if holding a precious gem. "Who cares about the paper right now?" Jonathan shouted, dizzy with fear and the swirling chaos around them. But the look on Theo's face stopped him. "The note, it's important. It has." Before he could finish, the crack erupted into a blinding light, and a shadow unfurled from its depths, looming large and terrifying. In that electrifying moment, Jonathan understood. Everything he thought was true was a carefully woven illusion. The shadow rose, taking form, revealing an imposing figure. The horror screeched through the air as recognition dawned. "It's you!" he gasped, voice trembling. The figure was a mirror image of his mother. "I had to do this," it whispered, darkness coiling around its body like a shroud. "For you!" Jonathan stumbled back, heart stopped, terror consuming him. "No, this can't be." The truth shattered around him, painful and absolute. They had played him from the start. The connections, the loyalty, the love, they'd all been puppeteering strings, guiding him into a trap. With everything spiraling, his world now felt unanchored, and he gasped for breath, asking in vain, "What now? What do we do?" The line between ally and enemy blurred, leaving Jonathan teetering in the depths of uncertainty. The stakes were higher, and it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about a fight for something he had never comprehended. Would they survive this unraveling, or was everything they cared for about to crumble? Jonathan stumbled back, heart pounding, as his mother's shadow loomed above him. The figure's twin resemblance stirred confusion and dread, merging memories of a life he mourned with the terror of an unfolding reality. "No, this can't be. You." "We're gone," he choked out, feeling rising panic grip him. But before any answers could materialize, the ground shook violently beneath their feet. Cracks spiderwebbed wide across the pavement, and Jonathan instinctively pulled Mia and Theo close as the shadows of the armored figures surged. Bodies pressed together, and a collective gasp rose like smoke, palpable and thick. Then, from the depths of that void, a horrifying screech echoed through the air, a sound so raw and primal that it silenced the chaos like a cruel spell. The crack widened, almost effortlessly, pulling the earth as if tethered to an unseen force. Jonathan's breath seized in his throat. What is happening? But no one had answers, only wide eyes and panic-stricken faces. The suited man smiled, a wide, chilling grin that made Jonathan's skin crawl. "You don't even understand the game you're playing, do you?" His voice cut sharply, like ice slicing through heat. "You're all just pieces on a board crafted by people you can't even imagine." Suddenly, an explosion erupted from below, the light so bright it felt like a sun smashing into the earth. Jonathan shielded his eyes and felt an undeniable warmth wash over him. The shockwave hit, sending everyone sprawling to the ground. When he finally risked opening his eyes, something absurd was unfolding. Out from the fissure in the earth, a shimmering portal emerged, light spilling over the cracked edges like molten gold. It was surreal and defied all reason. And then, in a heartbeat, a figure emerged from it. Jonathan's heart stuttered. Drew, his childhood friend, the one he thought had betrayed him years ago, for a life of luxury in a city he no longer recognized. He'd vanished from Jonathan's life like smoke, and here he was, looking straight at Jonathan like nothing had ever changed. "Drew?" Jonathan shouted, shock surging through him. "What are you doing here?" "I came back to finish this," Drew declared, stepping forward until he stood at the edge of the portal. "Everything you lost, everything, was never what you thought it was." The atmosphere thickened, heavy with confusion. "Finish what? You vanished, left all of us to face this mess alone." Anger flared, but within it was a flicker of hope. Maybe Drew held the answers they so desperately needed. But before Drew could respond, the suited man stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "This isn't about you, boy. You don't know who you're up against." Suddenly, the tension snapped like a taut string, and in that instant, a blinding flash burst from the portal. Jonathan shielded his eyes, feeling the ground tremble beneath him. When the light receded, everything changed. Standing where Drew had been moments ago is a colossal creature, scales shimmering and eyes glowing with an intelligence far beyond comprehension. It loomed over them, a guardian or perhaps a monster, emanating a pulsing energy. "What the hell?" Jonathan gasped, heart racing. He turned to look at Mia, whose eyes were wide with disbelief, and Theo, who seemed frozen in place as fog swirled at their feet. "I didn't bring you back for this!" Drew yelled, his voice drowned by the creature's low growl. The tension mounted until it felt unmanageable, a storm swirling before their very eyes. "All of you think this is about you," the creature roared, shaking the ground. "But you were all pawns in a game far larger than you can fathom." Jonathan's head spun. What game? Who was pulling the strings? Just when he thought he had finally grasped the threads of truth, the universe twisted again, spinning him into a vortex of confusion. "Run!" the armored figure shouted, and amid the chaos, Jonathan's world collapsed around him, ripped apart by this new, horrific revelation. The light, the creature, Drew's betrayal, nothing made sense anymore. Would they all survive this catastrophic spiral of secrets? Or had they already lost the fight before it even began? As the chaos unfolded, the creature loomed larger, a dark reflection of everything Jonathan once cherished. Fear gripped him, but he forced himself to stand firm. "This ends now," he yelled, not just at the creature, but at the twisted fate that had ensnared them all. The armored figure lunged towards the creature, creating a wall of protection between Jonathan and the evil that surged from the shadows. "Get out of here!" they shouted, determination sparking in their eyes. Jonathan felt Mia's hand tighten around his. She looked terrified, but her bravery shone through. He could see Theo's little face set in resolve, ready to fight for their future. "Run!" Jonathan urged, his voice straining against the encroaching dark. But he couldn't leave, not while the truth hung like a heavy fog above them. He had to know what his mother wanted. "You say you're here to set things right, then help us!" Suddenly, Drew stepped forward, pushing through the confusion. "Jonathan, there's no time. The shadows will consume everything if we don't act now." His eyes darted towards the figure, a mixture of fear and anger suddenly ignited. "But how can I trust you?" Jonathan shot back, his heart echoing with all they'd been through. "You vanished and left us to face this alone." "I had my reasons," Drew replied, desperation thick in his voice. "But that doesn't matter now. We can't fight this alone. We have to unite." The ground trembled again, dust swirling like a storm. Jonathan could feel the heat of the portal pulsating behind him, pressure building. "Okay, together, we fight together," he shouted, turning to his friends. "We won't let the darkness win." With an unexpected surge of unity, they gathered, joining hands. "You ready?" he asked Mia and Theo, their eyes filled with fear, but also a flicker of hope. Together they drew strength from one another. The creature snarled behind them, its shadows clawing at the edges of their hearts. "Charge!" shouted the armored figure, sprinting towards the creature, a beacon of bravery amid doom. And just like that, everything ignited. Jonathan shouted, feeling energy surge through him, echoing with the others. It felt like strength taken from shared moments of love, laughter, and resilience. The shadows recoiled as a wave of light surged from the center of their connection, washing away fear. But the creature roared, angry and fierce, and in that moment, Jonathan saw his mother's face flash in his mind, doubt mingling with love. "I won't let this go," he cried out, pushing into the fray. And then, in a roar of light and resolve, everything exploded. The shadows retreating, scattering like smoke caught in wind, a fleeting whisper against the dawn. The creature wailed one last time, a sound full of rage and defeat, before it crumbled into light, leaving behind a brilliant glow. Jonathan blinked, caught in disbelief. The noise quieted, and they stood together in a vast, empty space where darkness had reigned. Do we win?" he whispered, looking at Mia, Theo, and Drew, not fully understanding if this would last. "Maybe it's the beginning of something new," Drew replied softly, a smile breaking through. Mia grinned, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "We did it! We really did it!" Jonathan could scarcely believe it. Hope surged, bringing warmth to the cold and empty spaces of his heart. The shadows were gone, but questions lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that even though they had won this battle, so much more awaited out there in the unknown. And as they stood together, sunlight broke through the cavern in rays of golden warmth. "Together," Jonathan echoed, holding tight to the promise of friendships forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. They were bound now, more than ever, but the future still lay shrouded in mystery. What other challenges would they face? What had they truly awakened? As they stepped forward, Jonathan felt an urgency building in his heart. Together, we can face anything. But the real test was just unfolding. For the shadows may have receded, but the light brought uncharted paths ahead. And as that thought echoed through his mind, Jonathan knew one thing for sure. He would never walk alone again. And before you go, you need to subscribe now. You don't want to miss the next exclusive stories dropping soon. Hit that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comment section with your theory about what might happen next. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know this ending. This is the time to show your support and become part of our incredible community. Don't wait another second.